Welcome to the class. Today we are going to talk about clauses and sentences. We are going to see how a sentence is also a clause and a clause can be a sentence. We are going to see similarities and differences between the two, and above all, we are going to see what makes a sentence. What are the essential components of a sentence and how it works in our uses, in our discourse. We are going to see the role of uses of sentence, how sentences, complex sentences, a sentence with different clauses, different types of clauses, make a full discourse and help us use them in real world when we interact with others. We learn language to interact with others. There is no uncertain answer about it. However, in order to interact with others, in order to communicate your ideas with others, we need to interact with sentences. We need to have good control of the target language. We need to look at how a sentence works. We need to see how it gets processed in human mind and what is there for us to learn from that. Because once we pay attention to processing and computation of sentences, the way they work in human mind, it has miraculous results on how production works. That is, how we produce sentences. So we are going to look at these details, some of these details with larger goals in mind. Let's go ahead and see how they work. A sentence is a structural unit in language. There are words, there are sounds, and when any two units, when they combine, there could be a structural unit. But since we are looking at sentences, we call it a structural unit. So let's look at some examples and see what is a sentence. You see, we have 4 examples of different sentences. Please look at them. And we know a bit about sentences by now and see if they fulfill the requirements of being a sentence or not, and in what ways these examples are different from one another. Because there are 4 examples and they are all different from one another. And then we will look at what is a clause and what are the differences between a sentence and a clause. So look at a sentence. Raju likes flowers. It's a sentence. How do we assure that it's a sentence? Very simple application of fundamental rules of a sentence. It has a subject, Raju, and it has predicate, likes flowers. Likes, there is an agreement, proper agreement between subject and the verb. The verb happens to be transitive one, hence it has an object, that is flowers. So all the requirements are satisfied, met. It's a good canonical sentence of English. When we look at the other one, Raju knows that Sarita loves flowers. Is this a sentence? Let's look at this. Let's look at it and apply the same thing and see. Yes, Raju is the subject of this sentence, and then everything else in the sentence, beginning from knows to flowers, that knows that Sarita loves flowers, is part of the predicate. In that, the agreement is also taken care of between the verb of the predicate and the subject of the sentence. This is a transitive verb again, and it has an object, which is that Sarita loves flowers. It's a good sentence. Third one, we see Raju thinks that Sarita knows that Seema likes Mohan. Look at this sentence. Is it a sentence? Where are the fundamental components of a sentence in this example? Unlike the two, or let's put it this way, just as the previous two examples, it has a subject which is Raju, and then everything else in this, under this bracket, is part of the predicate. Here is the verb, it's the agreement between subject and the verb. Here is the verb, again it's a transitive verb, and this whole thing, that Sarita knows that Seema likes Mohan, is the object of this verb, this transitive verb. Thus, it's a sentence. Now, let's look at the last one, and then we talk about the similarities and differences between these sentences. What's happening in the last one? Again, this is the subject, Raju, and then the whole thing, likes to eat pizza with his friends in the garden in the evening after sunset for group work. The whole thing is predicate. Here, likes is the verb. It's a transitive verb again. There is an agreement between subject and the verb, and this is the object of the verb. Now, so they all four of them, 1, 2, 3 and 4, fulfill the essential requirements of a sentence, the requirements for making a sentence. The essential components of a sentence are met for all these four examples. But then, how are they different from one another? And how do we learn about clauses from these sentences? Which will do the justice for the title that you see, because we need to understand what is a sentence, what is a clause. Now, what I want you to see is to make sure that we understand that all these four examples fulfill the requirements of being a sentence. So, they are all examples of sentences, grammatical sentences. That's one part. Now, in the first sentence, what is the subject? The subject is a noun. The subject is the noun, but the object is a noun too, which is the object of the verb likes. In the second sentence, you have a transitive verb, no. And what is the object of this transitive verb? The object of this transitive verb is this whole sentence, that Sarita loves flowers. The object of the third of the verb thinks in the third sentence is that Sarita knows that Seema likes Mohan. And the object of the verb likes in the fourth sentence is to eat pizza, just that much. So, what are the similarities and differences between the objects here? Look at this. And then what are they? With his friends. This is one. In the garden, in the evening, after sunset, for group work. What are these things? As you can see, they are all prepositional phrases and they are all adverbs. So they all give information about liking. Okay. Now, let's come back to the point of an object and similarities and differences. A nominal element is the object in the first sentence. However, a sentence-like structure is the object of the verb know in the second sentence. So, that Sarita loves flowers, look at this. It's more than a sentence where Sarita loves flowers is another sentence where you see Sarita is the subject, loves flower is the predicate, and love is a transitive verb, and then flowers is the object of that verb. So this becomes a clause. That Sarita loves flowers is a clause which is embedded within the larger sentence. So the larger sentence had subject, verb and object. Requirements fulfilled. As an object, as we know, objects are required by verbs. That is, if a verb is transitive in nature, then you need an object. So within the verb, the object is embedded. In place of object in the second sentence, you have a whole structure that is like a sentence and more than a sentence. Same thing you observe in the third sentence. You have, so the object of the verb know is a sentence, and therefore this sentence is embedded within the matrix sentence. So what is embedded is called a clause. So that Sarita loves flowers can be called a clause. Now, if we pause here and try and understand, we are saying we have a whole sentence, matrix sentence, where clause is also part of the matrix sentence. True. No ambiguity here. So a clause is something that is embedded within a matrix clause. Hence, this clause can also be called an embedded clause. It can also be called a subordinate clause, because this is not independent. It does not have any status out of the main clause, which is matrix clause. So when the moment we say embedded clause, we are talking about a matrix clause where embedded clause is by definition embedded within it. And when we look at the clause independently, it looks like a sentence. So what we are saying is a clause, a sentence like clause can be embedded within a matrix clause, and therefore it's a clause, because when a sentence is embedded within a larger sentence, that sentence is called a clause. So if we just extend the larger meaning of the clause, we can say a sentence is also basically a clause, as long as we understand the difference between the main clause and the embedded clause, matrix clause and the subordinate clause. Once we understand this, it's fine. Now, if you look at the third sentence, then you see embedding within embedding. Here, Raju thinks, so this verb think has the object, which is the whole sentence. That Sarita knows, that Mohan likes, that Seema likes Mohan. Now, when you see that, so this is the object of the verb thinks. Now you start and see here in this sentence you have Sarita is the subject and you have the verb knows. This know has an object which is also a clause within this. That Seema likes Mohan. So that Seema likes Mohan is embedded within an embedded clause, that Sarita knows that Seema likes Mohan, which is part of the matrix clause. Raju thinks that Sarita knows that Seema likes Mohan. So this is an example of an embedded clause within an embedded clause. Now, so if you look at the similarities and differences between these three sentences, merely these three sentences, it gives you an idea of what is a sentence and what is a clause. That's what we need to understand. This is crucial part for understanding a sentence. Not only this clarifies the notion of a sentence for you, it also clarifies once more the essential components of a structure being called a sentence. We also know what a clause means, and we get to learn additionally that a sentence is also essentially a clause, and a clause can very well be a sentence. It's just called clause because it is dependent on another clause, which is in such a situation, one where it is embedded is called matrix clause, and what is embedded is called subordinate clause. So, the moment we start seeing larger objects, that is, when we see a sentence as an object, this is called an example of a complex sentence, because it has another sentence within the bare sentence. And I am also describing you an example that is in third, an embedding within embedding, which is a real example of a complex sentence. But at the end of it, the simplicity lies in the fact that even a complex sentence, structurally speaking, is like a simple sentence, because even the complex sentence has only three things: subject, verb and object. A simple sentence also has only these three things. So, we call a sentence complex where you have a sentence embedded as an object of the verb in a predicate, but we need to know that a simple sentence, there is not much of a difference structurally between a simple sentence and a complex sentence. At this point, I want your attention at the following point, that this is the reason why human mind has no pressure of processing a sentence. No matter how complex a sentence is, all complex sentences for human mind is treated as a simple sentence. I hope you can see the meaning of what I mean by saying a sentence is essentially a sentence, and even a complex sentence is essentially an example of a simple sentence, and why we call a sentence a complex sentence, and why we call a sentence a simple sentence. Once you understand this much, then you have got the crux of how sentence construction works. And then chances of you making errors gets minimized almost to zero. Now, let's look at the last sentence. Raju likes to eat pizza. A sentence can potentially end here because it meets all the requirements. You have Raju as the subject, likes to eat pizza as the predicate, where likes is a transitive verb. What does Raju like? To eat pizza is the object. Now, be very careful, and like I said, if you understand the differences and similarities between these sentences, you have got the total crux of this sentence. Total crux of understanding a sentence and a clause. Now, I am going to let you see something more which is very interesting for this sentence. One part is that it has several adjuncts in the sentence as adverbs, which simply provide information about liking. What Raju likes with his friends. What does Raju like? To eat pizza. How? With his friends. In the garden. In the evening. After sunset for group work. And as you know about the adjuncts, that number of adjuncts is not restricted in a sentence. You can have numerous adjuncts in a sentence. And the order of those adjuncts is also does not have any fixed priority. You can have any adjunct following anyone as long as they are chronologically making sense. That's one part. Second part where I want your attention is, look at the object. What does Raju like? If we say Raju likes pizza, it's a real example of a simple sentence which is like the first one, Raju likes flowers. But here the object is, he likes to eat pizza. Now, interesting part is, this is also a type of sentence. Look at this. The way it is a sentence is, it has the verb and he likes to eat. Eat what? Pizza. Pizza is the object of the verb eat. Then one can ask a question, if this is a sentence, where is the subject of this sentence? Now look at this. This is a sentence which is not a finite one, because look at the verb, it is in its infinitive form. It is not like knows, loves or likes. It is to eat, meaning it doesn't have any tense and it doesn't have any agreement on it. It's called an infinitival sentence. It's called non-finite sentence. So, and the subject here is not overtly present because we are talking about Raju himself. We are saying Raju likes to eat pizza. Who likes to eat pizza? Raju. So, Raju is the subject of the sentence, the predicate like. It is also the subject of the predicate to eat. And when two subjects refer to the same entity, the second one gets deleted. So, in a way, what we are basically saying here is Raju likes Raju to eat pizza. This one, Raju, and this one, they are referring to the same entity. We can say this is also I, this is also I, meaning they are co-indexed, they are referring to the same entity. We can drop this. When they do not refer to the same entity, then the subject of this clause has to be present in the sentence too. So, we can also say, potentially speaking, we can say Raju likes Sarita to eat pizza. Here, look at this. Sarita to eat pizza. Sarita is the subject of this predicate. And Sarita is J, Raju is I. Meaning when they are not co-indexed, then the second subject has to be present in the sentence. So, this way you get to know that one type of clause is infinitival clause. Non-finite sentences can also be clause. What's the difference between a non-finite sentence and a finite sentence? The difference is a finite sentence is good as a clause. It can be good, it can have independent status also out of the sentence. For example, we can say Raju knows that Sarita loves flowers. So this is an embedded sentence. This is an embedded clause within a matrix clause. But Sarita loves flowers can potentially become an independent clause by itself. It has potential to become an independent clause. But a non-finite clause like this one does not have that capacity to become an independent clause. For example, we can never say Sarita to eat pizza. This doesn't sound like an independent clause. An infinitival clause can always remain, has to remain an embedded clause. Nonetheless, it's a clause. It's type of a sentence. So, we get to see intricate beauty of the sentence structure when we look at how sentences are produced, their grammatical relations, their grammatical functions, and understanding these things with intricate details has serious impact on how we are going to write our sentences or when we are going to speak our sentences. We develop by looking at how the processing works here, that is human mind. We get to have a total control on how to use these things with confidence in our language. Now, so that concludes the point where we understand a clause and we understand its differences the differences between a sentence and a clause both. That is, similarities and differences between a sentence and a clause. Hopefully, it is clear to you with just these 4 examples. Let me show you more examples to help you understand these things and do some more practices for yourself. Now, I'll show you more examples of non-finite clauses for you to believe. I am sure you have just not paid attention to this. We use these sentences a lot in our daily discourse, repertoire, speech. Don't we say sentences like, I want to go? What is this sentence? I want to go. The object of the verb want is to go, which is also an infinitival clause. Keep this thing in your mind and I am going to show you this thing more. But before that, so look at the summary of the whole discussion. A sentence is essentially a clause too. Meaning, at a conceptual level, there is no difference between a sentence and a clause. But structurally, a sentence is independent and a clause is dependent. Okay? A matrix clause is a sentence. Embedded clause is dependent clause by definition and it doesn't have independent status. Clause can have different structural functions in a sentence. We have just seen, where did you see all these clauses that you have seen? A smaller, a nominal one, or smaller one, or a bigger one. They are all in the object positions. So they can work like nouns as in subject position, object position, or in adjunct positions. Here, in the adjunct, as an adjunct, you have seen only PPs, prepositional phrases. As an adjunct, you can also see a lot more structure. a lot more. As an adjunct, you can also see an entire clause, a sentence. So that will be adverbial clause as a sentence. We will get back to that in some time. But before that, it's important for you to know that a clause can work, that is, can appear just as nouns do in subject positions, in object positions, or adjunct positions. Because these are three different structural positions in any sentence. They can work like an adjective for the purpose of description. So we can have an adjectival clause also. And they may work as an adverb for modifications. So we are going to see examples of some of these for us to see clearly how they work as subject, how they work as object, and how they work as adjectives, and how they work as adverbs. We have just seen examples of clauses as objects, but nonetheless, I'll show you few more examples. But let's look at first simultaneously a clause as a subject and clause as an object. So the whole thing will be a clause, but it can be, because it can be replaced by one simple noun, so we are saying clauses as nouns. So look at this. As nouns, they can be subject or object of a verb. For Raju to get a good night's sleep is a bliss. The entire thing that you see in the bracket here is a full clause. For Raju to get a good night's sleep is a bliss. What is the, so this is a clause, this is a sentence, but it's a non-finite clause. Look at the verb here. The verb does not have any tense on it, rather it is in its infinitive form, to get. As you know, all infinitives have the structure of to go, to come, to get, to eat. These are infinitive forms. So you see, the verb here is in infinitive form, meaning it won't agree with the subject, or it doesn't have any aspect, it doesn't have any tense on it. Hence it is called non-finite. And by extension, you can understand a tensed clause is called a finite clause. So this whole thing is a sentence. This is a verb, and a helping verb or an auxiliary, and it's, what is it? It's a bliss. So we can say a flower is a bliss. So this whole thing can be replaced by one noun. A flower is a bliss. A book is a bliss. Same way we can say for Raju to get a good night's sleep is a bliss. Now look at this as an object. So here is the Raju is the subject and knows is the verb. And how to work on a computer, this whole thing is a clause, works like an object of the verb know. You have just seen several examples in the previous slide. Now look at this. Raju wants to go home. Here, to go home, it's exactly the same type of infinitival clause that we were discussing before. Raju wants to go home is a non-finite clause. As you know, because there is no subject here in this clause, because the subject is co-indexed with the subject of the matrix clause, hence the subject of the embedded clause is deleted. However, the position exists there because the moment they are not co-indexed, they appear overtly. Look at this sentence. Raju wants Sarita to go home. So when Sarita is J and Raju is I, it has to appear to mean the difference. If I say I want to go, What I mean is, I want I to go. When I want someone else to go, I have to put that name there. Raju wants Sarita to go. Hope you understand this thing. This is not a problematic position to take. All I am trying to make a distinction is, a clause as an object can be a finite clause as well as a non-finite clause. That's all is the distinction that we are trying to make here. And if you understand this part, I repeat it again, that you understand all possible intricacies of a sentence. Because we are looking at these intricacies based on the derived rules from how the processing works in human mind. Let's move ahead and see, which is, so we looked at the clauses as nouns in the subject position or in the object positions. Now we are going to look at clauses as adjectives or adverbs and see how they work. Raju, who lives in Chennai, is a teacher of English. The actual sentence is, Raju is a teacher of English. Look at this, who lives in Chennai is a full sentence where who is not really a question word, it's a relative pronoun. So this is a pronoun, this is this verb, and this is the location. It's a full sentence. So it's a sentential clause. Technically it is called a relative clause, but this clause, which is called a relative clause, works like an adjective. Therefore we say a clause can also function as an adjective. And what does this clause do? It describes, it gives you information about Raju. So whatever noun, and we call them adjectival because adjectives have functions of modifying a noun. These clauses are modifying a noun just like an adjective might do. So we see clause, we can call them clausal adjectives modifying a noun. Here in this case it is modifying the subject, a noun in the subject position. Look at this, Raju is a teacher in Chennai, which is the capital of Tamil Nadu. Look at this. Here we are describing a noun in the adjunct position, that is Chennai. Raju is a teacher in Chennai. And now, which is the capital of Tamil Nadu? This whole sentence is describing the city Chennai. So an adjectival clause can modify any noun in any position. Hence they are called adjectival clauses. Look at this. As far as rain is concerned, it is likely to begin in July. It is likely to begin in July is the main clause, where it is the subject and the whole thing works this way. As far as rain is concerned, look at this. This is a whole sentence, but it is being used as with adverbial function. This does not have any direct bearing on any part of the sentence, that is the subject or the predicate. So it has adverbial function. Given the age of the actor, who worked in many Hindi movies last year, he looks much younger. Here is the main clause, he looks much younger. He is the subject, looks much younger is the predicate, where looks is the verb, transitive verb, and agreement and all is done. Given the age of the actor who worked in many Hindi movies, this whole big clause is adverbial clause in its nature. Within the adverbial clause, we have a noun, actor. And we have another clause which has adjectival function within this one. Therefore, we have used two different colors here. Look at this. So, given the age of the actor who worked in many Hindi movies last year, is the adjectival clause for this actor. And this whole thing has an adverbial function for this sentence. So we can see that clauses can occur as nouns, as adjectives, as adverbs. This is the function that we need to know for understanding clauses. This is what we need to know as bare information with lot of examples. Thank you so much for today. Until we meet next time, we would like to recommend you to do few things. So once again, before I say thank you for your attention for today, here is something for your work. Please pay attention to these positions that we have discussed. Please pay attention to the grammatical functions that we are talking about, and you should at least have 2 examples of your own for each one of the examples that I have described to illustrate my points, and verify them for yourself that the things that we are describing in this lesson make sense to you, and you can produce your own examples for these illustrations. Having done that exercise, you would have clarified these things for yourself forever. Now I can formally say bye-bye to you before we meet next time. Thank you so much.